The Zone of Interest by Martin Amis. In the heart of Cat Zet, a place of stark beauty and hidden horrors, where the trees whispered secrets and the snow fell gray with ash, lived SS Obersturmfuhrer Golo Thomsen, a man keenly attuned to the sudden flashes of attraction, the thunderclap of desire. Experienced in the meteorology of first sight, he knew the cloudburst of initial infatuation, the fleeting sunshine, the ephemeral rainbow. And then, one late summer afternoon, as he sat with his notebook open, the breeze riffling through its pages, she appeared. Hannah Dahl, wife of the camp commandant, walked towards him, returning from the old town with her 2 daughters. She was a tall, full-figured woman, yet moved with an unexpected lightness, dressed in a white, ankle-length dress and a cream straw hat. As she walked, she laughed, head thrown back, throat exposed, a sound that resonated through the still air. Golo, clipboard in hand, fountain pen at the ready, found himself moving in parallel, keeping pace, drawn in by an invisible force. They passed the whimsical windmill, the grim gallows, the tethered Carthorse, and stepped together into the heart of Cat Zet. For Golo, it was a moment of undeniable impact, a sudden, sharp feeling of love or something like it. Later, in the officers' club, amidst horse brass and ersatz coffee, he confessed to his lifelong friend, Boris Eltz, a handsome man with a little Caesar's confidence, that he felt young again, struck by a feeling of inevitability, of romantic love. Boris, pragmatic and cynical, raised an eyebrow. Golo admitted the feeling quickly morphed into a more carnal curiosity, wondering what Hannah would look like unclothed. Boris, unsurprised, just chuckled. They mused over the Commandant, Paul Dahl, a man known as the Old Boozer, and the incongruity of him having such a striking wife. Why would anyone bring a woman like Hannah and their daughters to this desolate place? Golo, with his imposing height, his frosty white hair, his chiseled features and Arctic blue eyes, felt a stirring of ambition. He confided to Boris that he had a plan, one that hinged on word from his influential Uncle Martin. Boris, ever the pragmatist, warned him of the dangers. Hannah was too conspicuous, and Paul Dahl, boozer or not, was still the commandant. Boris, currently serving ramp duty as punishment for a recent brawl, described the ramp's eerie atmosphere, the detrainment, the selection, the grim procession to the Little Brown Bower, Cat Zet 2. He urged Golo to witness it firsthand for the experience. Golo, after a solitary lunch in the officers' mess, returned to his work at the Bunaverka, a vast factory complex built by slave labor. He endured a tedious meeting about carbide production and the ongoing struggle to relocate their workforce. As dusk fell, he sought out Ilse Grese in Cat Zet 1. Ilse, a teenager on the cusp of 20, was a different kind of woman entirely. She loved it here. In her tin-door cubicle, she sat hunched on her cot, reading a magazine, her uniform hanging from a nail. She greeted Golo with her habitual sneering languor, calling him Icelander, arsehole. Golo, in his Danish style, a counterpoint to his forbidding looks, offered her brandy, chocolate, and costly gifts, proposing a sentimental interlude after their talk. Ilse, reading an article arguing against women shaving their legs, remained unimpressed. On the floor lay her gun belt and oxhide whip, coiled and waiting. She finally looked up, revealing a wide, crinkled mouth and old eyes in a young face, her dirty blonde hair abundant and energetic. "You're an arsehole," she repeated, neither agreeing nor refusing his invitation. Golo's lodgings in the old town, at 9 Zilka Street, were serviceable but plagued by mice. His charlady, Agnes, introduced him to Maksik, a black and white cat with a tuxedoed appearance, a legendary mouser. Maksik, with his silent skill, quickly established a peaceful silence in the rooms. In this silence, Golo prepared a hot bath and laid out gifts for Ilse, waiting, watching the black silhouette of the ducal castle against the evening sky. Ilse arrived punctually, her only word faintly sneering, deeply languid. "Quick!" Hannah Dahl remained an enigma, rarely leaving her villa, missing social events. Paul Dahl, however, made appearances, his face a mask of wounded pride, lips beaked as if suppressing a whistle. He offered excuses for Hannah's absence, speaking of indisposition, the proverbial time of the month. Golo, walking past the sports ground, paused by a threadbare hedge, pretending to consult his notebook. He watched Hannah supervising a picnic for her daughters and a friend. Her silhouette, even with her face obscured, conformed to the national ideal. Stolid, countrified, built for procreation and heavy work. Golo, with his extensive carnal knowledge of this type, felt a familiar pull. He just needed word from Uncle Martin, a specific order from the capital, and he would act. He approached the orange villa, finding himself face to face with Humilia, a small, unsettling character in knitted woolens, rimless glasses, and an indeterminate age and sex, a witness. He asked for the master of the house, knowing Dahl was on the ramp receiving a troublesome special train 105. Hannah appeared, shimmering in white, and Golo, smoothly introducing himself as Golo Thomsen, presented himself as a bearer of urgent news from the chancellery. Hannah, appraising him directly, remembered seeing him before out of uniform. She questioned his role, his purpose. He simply stated, "I liaise." Inside, in the rosy glow of the main room, Golo complimented the marble surfaces and the covered veranda. He sought to distract her, to set her in motion, to observe her. He saw her vast, coordinated enterprise of a body, the might of her jaws, the supple curve of her cheeks. Humilia entered with lemonade and pastries. Golo subtly inquired about Humilia's faith, learning she was a witness. Hannah spoke of Humilia's devotion to her daughters, her refusal to sign the document that would free her and reunite her with her son, her apparent embrace of suffering. As 7 o'clock neared, the light softened. Golo felt the rumors of dream-strange possibilities, the impalpable license of dusk. But Hannah spoke of her husband, the Commandant, reminding Golo of the ever-bewildering fact. She mentioned Dahl's admiration for the witness's unshakable belief, their zealotry, virtues he sought to instill in his own ranks. Humilia, she noted, refused to clean Dahl's uniform, polish his boots, a point of friction. Golo, sensing the encounter cooling, shifted the focus to the garden, praising its paradise of tulips. Hannah laughed, a genuine, euphonious surprise correcting him. "They're poppies." She saw through his facade, his feigned adoration of flowers. He confessed his ignorance, then, emboldened, asked why women loved flowers so, offering his mother's explanation. Flowers made women feel beautiful, like film stars. Hannah, amused and intrigued, led him to the greenhouse. In the greenhouse, amidst the scent of earth and blooms, Hannah retrieved a crumpled packet of Davidoffs, offering Golo a cigarette. It was an act of illicit collusion in this land of prohibitions. As they lit up, a sound borne on the wind reached them, a helpless, quavering chord, a fugal harmony of human horror and dismay. They stood still, eyes widening. Then came silence, a shrill mosquito whir followed by the hesitant swell of violins. Speech seemed impossible. They smoked in soundless inhalations. Hannah buried the butts in a rubbish barrel. Back at the villa, Golo charmed Hannah's twin daughters, Paulette and Sybil, with French sweets and a feigned lack of surprise at their non-identical twinship. Paulette asked about the dreadful noise, dismissed by Hannah as Walpurgis night revelry. Sybil wondered how her father always knew if she had cleaned her teeth, a testament to his omnipresent authority. The girls were sent for baths, leaving Golo and Hannah alone. Golo, seizing the moment, asked about Hannah's visits to the old town, his rooms, his need for drapery advice, an invitation thinly veiled as a plea for her design expertise. Profile to profile, then face to face, Hannah folded her arms, her gaze steady. "And how do you imagine that might be arranged?" she asked coolly. Golo, reckless, suggested her husband would never know. Hannah stared, his smile curdling. "No, Mr. Thomsen, that's a very reckless suggestion. You don't understand, even if you think you do." She retreated, leaving him to wait in the villa with a Wednesday's observer for company. He would see her again, he knew, at the Commandant's dinner party on Sunday week. "So long," she said, dismissing him. "So long," he echoed, the encounter hanging in the air, a promise and a rejection intertwined. Paul Dahl, back in his office, poured brandy with quaking fingers, shaken by the incident on the ramp. 2 telegrams lay on his desk. The first, an official communication from Berlin, detailed the arrival of Special Train 105. The second, a cryptic warning from an old comrade, Walther Pabst, advised extreme caution. Dahl, a man of numbers and dictums, failed to prepare? Prepare to fail, had prepared accordingly. He summoned his forces, Prüfer, doctors, disinfectors, Sonderkommando, Kapos, troops under Boris Eltz, flamethrowers, Ilse Grese and her platoon, and even an orchestra of violinists from Innsbruck. He relished the logic, exactitude, and thrift of numbers. As 1902 approached, he felt a rush of energy, strength. Special Train 105 materialized, silent at first, then leaning as it climbed. Passenger cars, Dahl noted, unusually luxurious. 3 classes. Professor Zulz dryly remarked, "They do everything in style." Dahl bantered but was ready. The Golden Arrow pulled in, but instead of the usual masses, a scattering of baffled stewards alighted, followed by a small boy in a sailor suit, an elderly gentleman in an astrakhan coat, and a bent, crone-like figure with a pearl-handled cane. Barely 100 disembarked, mostly children and the elderly, already selected by age and infirmity. Dahl, grinning, cursed Pab's practical joke. Zulz, amused, joked about Asclepius and Panacea. Dahl dismissed the junior physicians, pared down his forces, retaining only a platoon: Saunders, Kapos, disinfectors, violinists, and Ilse Grese. Then, the old lady with the cane scuttled forward, demanding to know why there was no restaurant wagon on the train, no service even in first class. Dahl, barely suppressing laughter, barked orders to Ilse Grese. While luggage was unloaded and the bewildered Parisians formed into a column, Dahl reminisced about his Freikorps days with Pabst. He used the loudhailer, giving a reassuring speech about recuperation and honest work, sauna showers and tea and cheese sandwiches. Captain Eltz translated into French. They fell into step, leading the bewildered group through the birch wood. Dahl thought, why isn't it always like this? A comfortable journey, a dignified reception. How civilized compared to the crashing boxcars, the yelling, the whips. Then the accursed lorry arrived, a rust-barnacled van, backfiring rowdily. It braked violently, revealing its cargo, corpses, the day's wastage from KL-1 on its way to KL-2. A great whimpering howl arose from the Parisians. Zulz recoiled. Even Eltz jerked his head. The transport was on the verge of breakdown. Instinct took over. Dahl gave a wordless order. To the musicians. The violins began to play. At first, the music mirrored the whimpering cries, but then a melody took hold. The lorry lurched away, lost to sight. On they strolled, tiptoeing through the birch wood. The Parisians, from luxurious institutions, knew nothing of ghetto, pogrom, razzia. They were incapable of assimilating what they had seen. They reached the little brown bower, the undressing room, the chamber. Dahl turned heel as Prüfer signaled, knowing the doors were screwed shut. Later, Dahl reflected on the financial disaster of Special Train 105. He questioned the mobilization of a full storm, the costly use of the little brown bower. He would have words with Pabst. He worried about money, the trains, the cost of KL-3. Blobel's midnight call brought even graver news, an instruction that made his flesh go hot and cold, impossible to carry out while Hannah remained in the KL. A nightmare. He sought solace in aspirin and brandy. He thought of Hannah, of the magic cure of his 15 centimeters. He would invoke Dieter Kruger's name if needed. He was a normal man with normal needs. He checked on his daughters, finding Sybil styling her hair, wearing pink panties, which were blue. He corrected the fallacy that the SS was made up of proletarians, citing the blue bloods, professors, lawyers within their ranks. He discussed Buna's labor force with Sedig, Burkel, Thomsen, rejecting Burkel's suggestion of increased rations, emphasizing the political objective, not pampering. In the officers' club, he found a copy of Der Stürmer, banned in the KL. He detested its sensationalized anti-Semitism, preferring scientific evidence. He recalled Dachau, Der Stürmers in the canteen, the violence it incited, the Jews bribing their way out. He suspected the editor was Jewish, furthering their cause with the foul rag. Dahl found Davidoff's in Hannah's underwear drawer, worried about servants talking, his inability to discipline his wife. He pondered Thomsen, his impudent manner, his connection, wondering if he was a repressed homosexual. He reminded himself to reroute the lorry north of the summer huts. Brandy calmed his gums and aroused him. He would go to Hannah and invoke Dieter Kruger. He was a normal man with normal needs. Then a thought struck him. The balance sheet for Special Train 105. Prüfer burying the pieces in the spring meadow. Wiser heads would have prevailed. Prüfer would have listened to Small. Oh Christ, what am I going on about? If Horst Blobel meant what he said, then the whole bloody lot of them will all have to come up anyway. He would brood on this. He would sleep in the dressing room, tackle Hannah in the morning, and then they would both be in excellent spirits for their little gathering at the villa. For he was a normal man with normal needs. Completely normal. Nobody seemed to understand. Paul Dahl was completely normal. He checked on Sybil again, playfully accusing her of wearing pink panties, then revealing his knowledge of her styled hair and clean teeth. He knew everything. Shmuel, Sonderkommandoführer, mused on the magic mirror, the KZ itself, where you couldn't turn away. He and his Sonderkommando were the saddest, most disgusting men in the lager in history. Paradoxically, they did no harm, perhaps even a little good, yet remained infinitely disgusting, infinitely sad. Their work was among the dead, with scissors, pliers, mallets, petrol refuse. Yet they moved among the living, whispering reassurances to the new arrivals. Ihr seid 18 Jahre, we whisper, und ihr habt ein Fach. You are 18 years old and you have a trade. After a major Aktion, they received vodka, cigarettes, sausage. They were never hungry, never cold at night, sleeping above the disused crematory where sacks of hair were cured. His philosophical friend, Adam, now gone, had said, "We don't even have the comfort of innocence." Shmuel disagreed. He would still plead not guilty. A hero would escape and tell the world. But Shmuel felt the world already knew, given the scale. He lived for 3 reasons: to bear witness, to exact vengeance, though the mirror showed no killer, not yet, and to save a life per transport, a youth, invariably male, snatched from the selection lines. Ihr seid 18 Jahre alt, we whisper, und ihr habt ein Fach. You are 18 years old, and you have a trade. Golo Thomsen received a letter from Hannah Dahl, a plea to find Bodan, the gardener, transferred to Stutthof, and to unravel the mystery of Torquil's death. Though not a declaration of love, Boris saw it as a sign, Hannah's cry for help to her only friend. Golo, however, remained petulant, wanting more than friendship. He felt a simmering impatience, but for now, the matter froze. Boris was dispatched to Goleschau, tasked with reforming its demoralized guardhouse. Before leaving, he prioritized getting Esther Kubis out of Block 11, a political prisoner now in Gestapo custody, a task requiring bribes and threats. At the theater, Golo could only mime a promise to Hannah for Friday next. The play, And the Woods Sing Forever, about Pomeranian yokels, left him numb, yet physically roused by Hannah's presence. He considered a visit to Ilse Grese, but restrained himself. Another letter arrived, this one addressed to Paul Dahl, from Bayer, the pharmaceutical firm. It was a cold clinical request for another transport of 150 women, the previous batch having all died during drug experiments. Burkel, showing Golo the letter, lamented the faulty attitude of treating the workforce as disposable, citing a recent incident where a prisoner's collapse and a capo's brutality resulted in chaos and lost time. He proposed treating the workers better, offering an incentive, decent food and rest, like Shmuel and his Sonderkommando. He believed he and Sedig could sway the Vorstand, even reach Uncle Martin. Golo, unconvinced, argued against pampering Jews, quoting the Reichsfuhrer's view of their aversion to work, their inherent sabotage. Burkel, exasperated, countered with produktive Vernichtung, but argued that Vernichtung wasn't productive. He saw the Jews as a workforce to be exploited ergonomically. He would pursue his reforms, even without Golo's support, finding another route to the Chancellery, perhaps even the Reichskanzler himself, for a meeting about weaponized poison gas. Outside the Bunaverka, Golo encountered Captain Roland Bullard, the British POW. He offered him cigarettes, initiating a clandestine contact. He walked on, contemplating the vast Bunawerk, its promise of autarky, the war's ultimate aim. Later, at the officers' mess, Golo and Boris, drinking vodka, debated Ilse's lesbianism, Boris's rescue of Esther, and the story of Sonderzug 105. Boris relayed Dahl's version of Bodan's fate, the tortoise's death. Golo, still needing to inform Hannah, felt troubled. Boris advised patience with Hannah, to be her only friend, to lay her down. Golo at the summer huts met Hannah, delivering Boris's version of Bodan's death. Hannah, surprisingly, revealed she, not Bodan, had given Dahl his black eyes. She asked Sybil and Paulette a question, and Golo, overhearing, responded with a cryptic statement about knowing nothing and the fun of finding out. Back in Cat Z3, Golo found Dov Kohn, Bodan's piccolo, who revealed the truth. Bodan witnessed Dahl's weakness, his crying over the tortoise's death, and was punished for it. Golo realized Hannah's story was true. Walking Dov back, Golo gave him money and cigarettes, instructing him to lie to Stumpfegger about their conversation, inventing a story of a Berlin-ordered investigation. He walked into the gray snow, feeling followed, suspecting Dahl. He planned to reassure Hannah at the Sunday recital, then end their liaison at the Equestrian Academy, writing a farewell letter. In Burkel's office, Golo rejected Burkel's worker reforms. Burkel, in turn, rejected Golo's Uncle Martin, hinting at a direct appeal to the Reichskanzler. On Friday, Golo walked to the summer huts, finding Hannah asleep in the pavilion. Watching her, he felt a shift within himself, a return of hope. When she awoke, she spoke of unimaginable ghouls. They embraced, a silent pact forming. Hannah spoke of Dieter Kruger. Golo knew he was in it. Dahl, in his office, peeved about his black eyes, felt his authority waning. He ordered Prüfer to implement the project, to grind the ashes, to erase the evidence of mass murder. Prüfer, ever obtuse, questioned the point. Dahl, losing patience, forced him to taste the tainted water, the stench of death. He summoned Schmuel, expanding his Sonderkommando, assigning him the task of the project. He planned to send Hannah and the girls to Rosenheim, to Abbey Timbers, away from the KL, away from the stench, away from Hannah's knowing gaze. He would cure Hannah with his 15 centimeters, invoke Dieter Kruger if needed. He was a normal man, completely normal, lost in denial. Schmuel Sonderkommandoführer saw the KZ as a mirror, inescapable. He and the Sonderkommando were the saddest, most disgusting men, yet perhaps doing a little good. They were not even innocent. He lived to bear witness, seek vengeance, no killer yet, and save a life, per transport, a youth. Ihr seid 18 Jahre alt und ihr habt a Fach. Outside, Golo felt the Silesian winter closing in. In Dahl's office, the men discussed Japanese victories, Axis ascendancy, future invasions. Dahl, glancing at Golo, noted his resemblance to Heydrich. Golo played along. Dahl spoke of Wehrmacht victory, SS dominance. The phone rang. Golo excused himself, claiming a courier. In the sitting room, Hannah was absent. Norberte Uhl lay drunk. Alice Seisser stared blankly. Golo left, receiving Hannah's suggestive note from Humilia, his mind consumed by desire and danger. Boris arrived, agitated about Esther's postcard declaring it sabotage. Esther was now in Bunker 11. Boris, initially wanting to help, now felt she needed to learn. Golo, despondent, wondered how to help Esther, how to care about mere life and death. Boris described Bunker 11, nature taking its course, 2 weeks average survival. He asked about Hannah's rejection, sensing Golo's despair. Golo, preoccupied, wondered how to free Esther. He tried to refocus on life and death, on something beyond his doomed infatuation. Aftermath. The summary details the fates of key characters after the war. Schmuel's planned death, Bullard's execution, Mobius's heart attack, Boris's heroic death at Kursk, Prüfer's demise in the Sonderkommando revolt, Peters's death in Dachau, Bormann's suicide, Ilse Grese's hanging, Dahl's execution in Poland, and the fates of Zulz and Antres in the Gulag. Alice Seisser's fate is left ambiguous, with a chance of survival. Esther Kubis's fate remains unknown, a question mark hanging over her resilience. Golo, reflecting on Esther, recalled Boris's belief in her survival, her defiant spirit. He remembered his last conversation with her, her hatred for him, her liquid dancing, her vow not to die in the Cat Zet. He pictured her dancing in stripes, a stark image of beauty and horror intertwined. Golo, revisiting Burkel's office, found him replaced by Strunk. He discussed Burkel's proposed reforms with Strunk, finding him resistant. He received a letter from Bayer, another cold request for women for experiments, a grim routine. He felt a growing unease, a sense of impending doom. At Dahl's villa, Golo found Hannah distant, preoccupied. He tried to engage her, but her responses were curt, dismissive. He felt a growing chasm between them, a sense of hopelessness. Dahl, in his office, struggled with the project, Prüfer's incompetence, Blobel's impossible order. He felt trapped, overwhelmed. He sought solace in brandy, fantasizing about Hannah, about Dieter Kruger. He was a normal man, lost in a world of madness. Schmuel, in the Sonderkommando, contemplated his fate, Walpurgisnacht approaching. He reflected on bearing witness, on vengeance, on saving a life. He wrote his testimony, burying it for posterity. He considered the nature of companionship among the Sonders, their shared sadness, their stolen moments of connection amidst the horror. He realized the eyes were gone, the souls untenanted. Dahl, visiting Small at the pyre, offered a twisted bargain: kill Hannah to save Shulamith. Small, faced with this impossible choice, felt the weight of his own mortality, the approach of Walpurgisnacht. He considered the mouse, the cat's indifference, his own defenselessness. He was trapped, a pawn in Dahl's monstrous game. Small reflected on the eating, the only sense he could control amidst the sensory assault of the KZ. He saw the KZ as a mirror, reflecting the world's darkness. He thought of Shulamith, of his love for her, his gladness he'd never see her again, unable to describe his reality to her. He recounted Joseph's testimony, the lies of children's heroism. He knew he would not lie in his own testimony, even as he acknowledged his disgust. He saw Hannah Dahl occasionally, her presence a painful reminder of his lost life. He sought out other Polish Jews, learning of Belzec, Treblinka, the Łódź ghetto, Shulamith still in the attic. He loved her, but was glad he'd never see her again. He considered Maciek's vow to rescue her, hoping for her escape. In the bunk room, the Sonders debated their fate, the extraterritorial nature of the lager. They talked of resistance, of vengeance, of bearing witness. But something was missing, something intrinsic to human connection: the eyes. Smul felt a chilling premonition of his own end, of Walpurgisnacht approaching. The summary ends with Smul preparing for his final act, for Walpurgisnacht, for the impossible choice Dahl has forced upon him. He is ready to bear witness, to exact vengeance, to save a life, even as his own life is forfeit. He is ready to face the darkness, to step across the boundary between the seen and the unseen worlds, between life and death, in the heart of the zone of interest. If you enjoyed this book breakdown, please consider liking this video and subscribing to get notified when we post our next book.